to Pro Booth Talk, photo booth insight, tips, and banter recorded by boothers for boothers. Brought to you by ProBoothTalk.com.
Welcome to Pro Booth Talk, Lap. How are you doing?
Hi, Jason. Hi, everybody. Welcome back.
Welcome back. Thanks for joining us. So, contracts. I guess the title here today is kind of clickbaity because, of course, you need a contract. I certainly don't want to suggest that you shouldn't have a contract. Obviously, we all just went through COVID where contracts became more crucial to everyone's business than everyone ever realized contracts would be. So definitely have a good contract. And I also want to touch on the importance of having a real contract that's tailored to you and your business. I know there's a lot of free contracts in different groups, or a lot of times someone will say, if you sign up with my program or this or that, we'll give you a free contract. And those may be good starting points. But when you finish filling in your name, you definitely find a local attorney that specializes in business and contract law, and at least have them look it over, because I also in the beginning just had a very basic contract, and the first time I sent it to a client that was in the corporate space and they had their lawyer look it over, like they sent it back pretty much like I felt like when I was in school and turned in an assignment and there's like red markings everywhere. It was pretty embarrassing. They were just like, this doesn't make sense. What is this? And they had all kinds of stuff crossed out and basically rewrote my contract for me in the most embarrassing way. And after that, I, of course, went and took this to an attorney and had them write something up. And it was only this was 7 or 8 years ago. So prices have probably changed, especially after COVID. But I want to say I paid like $350 or something. It wasn't very expensive, especially for the amount of protection it provides, especially during COVID. Our contracts were very valuable. So starting there, make sure you have a contract. So back to the title. I guess that came about because so often I see people on different forums when they're struggling, they don't know what to do, they don't know how to respond to a client. A client wants them to move a backdrop or move their setup once they've been set up, or the client asks them to start an hour later than they were originally scheduled for. And the common response to that I see is people ask, well, what does your contract say? And personally, I take that as a somewhat of a passive aggressive response that is meant to belittle people and not provide the answer that people are looking for. Obviously, if their contract covered what to do when the client asks to start an hour later, they wouldn't be asking in the first place, what do I do because my client asked me to start an hour later. They're asking because they don't know and they don't have that information readily available. So first of all, I want to address that. Quit saying, what does your contract say? Because you're not providing any useful information. And second, you shouldn't be saying that anyways, because contracts shouldn't have all those things included. It shouldn't say what to do when you need to change backdrops or move your kiosk after setup or start an hour late. Like the number of times people say that, if all of that information was included in a contract, it would be, 50 pages long, and that just isn't the purpose of a contract. A contract, essentially, and maybe we should sidebar right now to have the obligatory, we're not attorneys and we're not providing legal advice. All of this should be ran through your own attorney. But your contract basically is a safety net. It should be seen as a safety net for legal purposes. It should cover you and offer protection in case of cancellations, in case of someone getting injured or whatever. Those things are insurance things, but your contract should say who's liable and things like that. So really, your contract should just be basically covering your legal obligations and act as like I mentioned, a safety net. So what I would like to see is a transition from people discussing contracts to discussing mission statements, because I feel like people's mission statements should more encompass the answer to those questions than their contracts, because mission statements are very broad and vague, and they don't need to answer every specific question because they very broadly and generally answer those just in a couple sentences. So if everyone just takes a moment to consider their own mission statement and what their mission statement says. Lap, do you know offhand what your mission statement says?
I should catching me off guard, but I know that my goal for my company is to provide the best service and to be memorable to my clients. I honestly I don't think people bring up question of what they should do for things like moving the backdrop or starting an hour early. I don't think that they don't necessarily, it's not that I think that they don't have it mentioned in their contract. I think there's the whole point of like when you're on site, you start to wonder if you want to follow your contract or if you want to be a human being. I think it's sometimes that is the bigger question. It's not, when I've had occasions where I show up and, a client will tell me, we want you to move in the middle of the event. And I know in my contract, it does say if your space isn't ready and we have to set up somewhere else or we have to move, there's an additional charge. But there's some points where for me, I'm thinking, is this really a big deal that I actually want to refer to my contract and be like, you know what, on my contract, it says that we have to charge you XX dollars for this move. I think it's more of a question of people sit there and wonder, like, is this really worth me making a big deal out of? Or do I want to step up and be that company that delivers the service that this client needs? I think that's the real question people are asking, and when someone responds, what does your contract say? It's exactly what you're saying. You're not really addressing the real concern that people are bringing up.
Yes, I agree. So it's not addressing what they are technically asking. And if your contract is your safety net, then your mission statement should really just be like your map or your guide or your compass, I guess. And like you mentioned, like I kind of sprung this topic on you right when we were starting. And it is a topic that I had thought about a couple of years ago when I was recording the podcast previously. And even then, I didn't prepare enough to have my own mission statement up. I'll bring it up before the end of the recording. But anyone out there, even if they don't have a mission statement, they could do what Lap just did. Like just pause for a second and just think of 2 sentences of what your mission statement would be if you were to write one right now. And I imagine it would be something similar to what she just said. Like you want to provide the services that people are looking for. You want to leave a lasting impression, a positive lasting impression on people. And that typically should be the guide when trying to figure out how to approach different requests or asks by different clients. Like what does your mission statement say? Does it say I want to please the client or refer back to the contracts? Like if you're going to I don't know, PBX, and you're trying to check in early, and the I don't know why they call them the receptionist or whatnot, if she's referring back to the contract that you signed, like what do you want to see happen there, I guess, and what would you expect to happen? And I'd say your answer should fall probably somewhere in between those 2 responses. In that scenario, what I would expect to happen is they will either tell me that they don't have any rooms available, or they'd offer me one with a fee attached to it. And what I would want to happen is them to just say, yeah, absolutely, here's a room for you. So I would say that your answer should probably fall somewhere between those 2 resolutions. So the same thing applies if someone asks you to move a backdrop. You would expect to either have a small fee or for them to just move it and let your event go on without a hitch. And your response should go somewhere between those 2 things. Especially if you're working with a planner or DMC, or those people care way more about how easy you make their events than how much you charge. Like
Absolutely.
want companies that are just going to come in and do their job and not bother them because a million other people are bothering them. If they say, we are going to have the photo booth over there, but now there's a dessert table there, can you move it over here? Either say no problem or say, the sunlight is going to hit that. It may not be a good spot, but I noticed over here is a good spot. What do you think about that? Like, offer solutions and not problems, basically.
I think it's important to assess the situation too, because there's occasions where they want you. We've had a situation where they had an event and they wanted us to move the photo booth into another across a bridge into another building. Situation like that, I mean, it's not a matter of just you deciding if you want to go through that hassle of changing or moving the photo booth. You're literally hiking into a whole nother building. You don't know what to expect over in that space. A situation like that, you have to stop and think, what, this is not practical for us to move mid-event. What we can suggest to you, exactly what you're saying, like, always find a solution so you're easy to work with your client. So it's, don't just say no, we can't do that. You can offer solutions. Like, we can't move the photo booth into another building in the middle of the event, but what we can offer is either a roamer, we can do like a selfie booth over there, or we can rent a whole second booth in that space. I think being really easy to work with is key on your decisions. Another example is, we just did a wedding, I think just last week, where we looked at the timeline, the space, and they had the wedding ceremony running in a beautiful space in the lawn that overlooked the mountains, and had a gorgeous view. They wanted the photo booth to capture that, so like more of a photo lounge, but they also had cocktail hour in that same space. So there literally was no space in between setup and moving into, the where they wanted the photo booth, where they had the cocktails, where they had the ceremony. And we talked it out with the client, with the planner, and we made it work. We set up in a room right next door and we just slid it into place. And the nice thing was, we captured the scenery, so there was no backdrop needed. We just had to quickly slide the booth in and cover up the wires, and we're set to go. So I think it's definitely, you have to sometimes pull away from like what your contract says and just make a decision as a boss. Like, you have to decide, is this worth the risk involved? Because it's not just about moving your booth in, it's about having people in that space, you guys setting up. There's always that concern, and as long as you address it with your planner, your client, it just I think the only time that the contract came up for me, Jason, is during COVID. I think that was like the biggest. I think all of us, it hit us at that time. You have your contract in place to protect you for moments like that, where the entire world pretty much shut down. And in my contract, it says, if you book it, if it's under 30 days, you're responsible for the full balance. And we had events, I mean, I think it was like March. Was it March? Like the first week of March, we had events
Yeah.
we always have events that book last minute. So we had an event, it was like a few $1,000s. They booked like a premium service. I can't even remember what it was, fully paid for, because they booked it super last minute. And then 3 days later, the entire world shut down. And, that question came up to me, like, what do you do in this situation? And in your contract, there's the force de majeure or something like that, very fine print about, like, if you can't deliver the services, regardless of what your contract says, you have to refund the client. And that was totally new to me, a totally new concept. But even for clients that didn't fall under, because there was like a lot of gray area during COVID, because we were shut down for 2 years. There was some moments where technically we were like partially open. We weren't completely open. You could run the event, but clients were choosing not to. And I took a stance of, I'd rather be a human being and be understanding, because if I was in that situation, I understand what the contract says. I understand that the client is actually liable for the cost of the photo booth if they decided to cancel. But on the human aspect, I took the stance of more like, if this was me and I was in this situation, my mom had her 60th birthday during COVID. So it was a milestone birthday for her. I wouldn't want to celebrate a 63rd birthday as a milestone, that time already passed. So I took it more of like, I don't want my client to see me as, what does the contract say, you know?
Sure. And I think everyone kind of approached COVID differently. A lot of people says they just gave refunds to people, and a lot of people stood by their contracts and did not refund anybody. We kind
Yeah.
of went somewhere in the middle. We did refund everything except for that initial deposit because financially we just, there's no way that we could have refunded every event that we had planned out, because we had a lot of events planned out. So we refunded anyone that was within that 30-day period the amount that above their deposit, but we did retain all deposits, but we did alter our contract to offer that as a credit towards any future bookings. Of
Yeah.
course, most people just understood. We did have pushback from two companies that coincidentally, one was a law firm and one was a woman whose husband had a law firm, and we stood our ground. Unfortunately, our contracts were pretty airtight because I had already been through an episode where I didn't have airtight contracts and had them corrected, and both of those held up. They both threatened us for a bit and then backed off, and one of them we actually have an event coming up with them in about 2 weeks.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, I thought we would probably lose that client, but it was a big job. It was like I don't know, maybe $20,000. So their deposit was substantial, and during COVID we just couldn't be giving deposits back to everyone, or else we just didn't have that big of a bankroll. And they told us, well, we don't think that we're going to have our next event in Las Vegas, so you need to give us a refund. And we're like, we'll go wherever you're going, as long as it's in the U.S. I think they said it was in Indiana. We were like, we'll go to Indiana. We won't charge you any additional for travel or whatnot.
Travel.
So we got you covered. Don't worry. And she's like, actually, we still want the refund. And we're like, we literally told you we'd go anywhere in the country and not charge you extra. So we're not refunding you. So, and they did ultimately. The next event was in Vegas. So we applied that deposit to their event, and we assumed that would be the last time that we worked with them. But they've worked with us every year since, so it worked out really well for us.
That's awesome.
But COVID aside, like you, we've never had to use our contracts. I do see a few people come up every now and again with the question of collections. Obviously, hopefully you're collecting your balances before the events. I know there's a lot of things like schools and some corporate clients that have 30-day nets or 60-day nets, and if you choose to work within those, then that's up to you. And my past life, I guess, I was in the collection world, so I've got a lot of experience. I've been to small claims literally several hundred times.
Oh my God!
For different cases, so. I'm very experienced in collecting money, so I it doesn't bother me if someone's like got a check in the mail, because I know I'm going to get paid. And when you're talking about small claims court, like your contract surprisingly isn't that crucial. It is really just important. Like, you see a lot of conversation and arguments about things like the word deposit versus retainer, and I can tell you firsthand, like it doesn't matter. Again, not lawyers, don't take our legal advice, but with extensive experience in small claims court, the judge 100% is just basing their decision off of what they feel people understood, because small claims court is kind of based around that you're not supposed to have lawyers or extensive contracts. It's supposed to be the layman's court. So if you've got some jargon that is meant to confuse people, it won't matter. The judge will always base their opinion based on what they felt the client understood. So if you say non-refundable retainer or non-refundable fee or non-refundable deposit, that word non-refundable is the key there, that the judge knows that everyone knows what non-refundable
Both
is.
parties understand. Yeah.
Yeah. So I haven't had to take a client to court in the photo booth world. But like I said, I've been in small claims court extensively, and I think pretty much anyone's contract is good enough to win a small claims court as long as there's some very basic language of a non-refundable deposit. Judges will generally understand that your part of the obligation or a contract agreement is placing a hold on that date, and you're turning away other clients. So they will typically respect that commitment has a value, and I have seen, even though it wasn't myself, I've seen different DJs and services like that enforce a 30-day requirement to pay in full, like you mentioned that you have. And I've seen judges require that people pay their retainer or pay the final amount due, even though their event was canceled because that time was blocked off. And I've also seen them just not require a refund. So typically you're going to be okay with whatever your contract says in that respect. But for us personally, like, we will give a full refund up to 30 days because we know we can fill that time. Like, we've got enough things on our books that a refund isn't going to, like, we care more about our relationship outside of COVID. We care more about that relationship. And we're not going to get into an argument over, unless you've ordered something custom, we'll deliver that to you and keep the money, but we're not going to refund you for custom work. But otherwise, sure, you're not getting married anymore, no problem. Here's your retainer back. I don't even care. We'll fill it with somebody else. And if we don't, like, your retainer's not enough to get a bad review or something.
The contract has really come in handy for me because of the way LA events are. There's a lot of last minute events, but then there's a lot of stuff where, I wouldn't say a lot, but there's been occasions where they think they want a photo booth. We show up, either we start setting up or we fully set up, and they come over and they're like, you know what, we don't have the space for the photo booth, or, we decided that this isn't what we want on this space, and we've had to pack down. The contract has come in handy for reference for things like that. And that's a lot more extreme. That's where you have your team sent out. You already have the graphics. You have everything configured for the event. You're on site. And having a contract in place has allowed us to tell our client, you know what, we fulfilled our side. If you guys decide that you don't want this photo booth after all, for whatever reason, there's no refund for this because, we dedicated our time, our team, and we actually fulfilled our side, So if you're sending us home, there's no refund. There's occasions where the event completely canceled, not just them not wanting the photo booth board, but the event completely canceled. And I've offered the client, you know what, I understand things happen. The event fell through and it's nobody's fault. The entire event canceled, kind of like you're saying, like a wedding that fell through. What we'll do is we'll offer you a credit balance to your next event. It's good for up to 2 years. Just reach out when you're ready. And again, that's going into following your contract, but also just being a human being and understanding, like, stuff happens. Sometimes it's not that they want the event to fall through. It's just they couldn't put everything together fast enough in that time frame, and they have to cancel the entire event. So those are occasions where the contract has been very beneficial to me. It's not something where you actually have to, like, here's what the contract says. It's just like, yeah, we fulfilled our side. Mm-hmm. There's no refund for this,
So did those clients, specifically the ones where you, like, showed up and they had a change of mind, did they ask for a refund?
They don't, because I think a lot of the companies that we work with, they're like production. It's like full on corporate events. So they understand that, you showing up and not fulfilling the event is, you still have dollars invested into that, so we don't do a lot of weddings. I could see like a wedding or like a birthday party where they're going to sit there and complain, but on the corporate side, they understand that, there's a whole back end involved for the photo booth. So we've never had any pushback, but I always do make it very clear that, there is no refund if we pack up, because we did fulfill our side.
We've had that several times as well, where we show up and the client just ultimately decided they're going a different direction. They've never asked for a refund either. The one we like the most, because it's like our most profitable event ever, is they hired us for like a 4 or 5 day mosaic, and it was, I can't remember how much it was, but it was like $12,000 or something. And they decided, instead of the typical like gator board that we use, they wanted us to print and stick to vinyl so that they could roll it up at the end of the event. And we had
Yeah.
several discussions about vinyl and how vinyl presents. And, we brought steamers and irons and things to make sure that the vinyl was very flat and presented as well as it could. But it was still vinyl, and like an hour into the event, the client pulled us aside, which was a DMC, and they're like, "Hey, the client doesn't like how this presented. We know that we had this discussion with you. We know that you told us not to use vinyl, but
Yeah.
here we are, and they want you to pull it." And we literally worked for less than an hour, and they didn't ask for any kind of refund or anything. So we're like, that was the most profitable hour we've ever had. So we came back to the office, and we actually completed we set up a camera and did a time lapse and completed the mosaic just so we could use it for marketing and stuff.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it's a great thing, but at the same time, it's disappointing too, because you want to be able to show off your service and experiences to all the guests and all the visitors that are there. So you're not working the event, but as an owner, you're also disappointed. I want to be very clear about that it's awesome. It's awesome to be paid to work, a lot less than what you actually are contracted for. But at the same time, you can't help but feel disappointed in situations like that, because you're not exposing your team and your services to all the people that were going to be in attendance.
Sure.
But still, it's happened to us. I think another example I have was, I had a bride that was looking for glam. This was a few years back. It was shortly after COVID. So she had been researching for months and months and was trying to find the perfect glam without having to pay, the Mir's price. And they found me. They had spoken to several other providers, and when they spoke to me, I mean, they heard in my voice, I knew what I was talking about. And she right away booked the glam, signed the contract, full payment. The event was like 3-4 weeks later, something like that. And the very next day, she reached out to me through social media and was like, started asking about the contract. Like, what does the contract say about this? And I usually try not to work off that contract. So I asked her straight up, like, what's the real concern? Like, why are you asking about the contract? Is there a concern about our services? And this is, again, open conversation. My contract says she is not entitled to a refund because the event was within that 30-day window. And I had a conversation with her, and I spoke to her about our glam, and, she shared with me the concerns that she had about the services. And I told her, because I'm in the boat of, like, the people who book me, regardless of what my contract says, the people who book me, I want them to be 200% confident in the services that we provide. I want them to not have any concerns about anything that we're going to bring, the experience that we're going to bring, and the experience they have with us, like before the event, during the event, and after the event. So I shared with her, you know what, if you really are not comfortable and you don't feel confident in our services, our contract says that I do not owe you a refund. The full balance is absorbed through us. But I also don't want any clients that aren't totally confident in the services that we are, confident in their decision. So if you do want a refund, I am happy to give you your refund. And I don't think she expected me to say that. And it did open up a conversation with her where she felt a lot more comfortable. She's like, okay, this is the real concern. And, my friends brought up this, da, 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 da. And I overcame her objections. She went and moved forward. She had concerns about, like, tipping the attendance and a few different issues that she had, or concerns that she had. I addressed everything direct. We ran the event. She ended up tipping my guy. She loved the service, refers all her clients. I think just like 2 weeks ago, this is a few years ago that we did her event, but a few weeks ago, she was like, oh, I referred my friend to you. You guys are so awesome. So I don't feel like you should and that's how you approach it too. Like, if someone reaches out to you about the contract, when you sit there and say, this is what my contract says, it is very off-putting. That client easily could have been like, you know what, I just want to cancel, send me my refund. She could have fought it. She could have had a fit about it. It's very standoffish. And the way I approached it was a lot more positive. It was very reassuring to her that I said to her, I don't want you to use me, even though my contract says you have to because it's already 30 days. I don't want you to use us if you are not fully confident in what we're going to bring. And if you don't love us, I'm not going to force anybody to be my client. So if you do want a refund, I'm happy to give it to you. You know, just share with me what your concerns are. And she loved us. I mean, and she loved my team. She had concerns about having to, we were very expensive for glam, not as much as Miramar, but you know, a lot higher than a lot of the folks here in the LA area. She had no reservations after the event. Like, she was like, I'm so glad that I invested in you. I'm so glad that we made this decision. You know, tip my team, even though when she first brought up her concerns, she was worried about the extra cost of tipping. My team was so great. She was like, take my money. You know, so I think that's another way to, it's related to the whole mission statement. Like, yes, what does your contract say? But what do you want your company to actually be? You know, you don't want to refer to the contract and be like, nope, I'm sorry, you want to cancel, you lose everything. You know, you don't have to approach it like that.
Yeah, it's a give and take. It's a balancing. Of course, we've got a contract for a reason. So despite our title of the episode, it is obviously important what your contract says, but it needs to be balanced legally and ethically with what your mission statement says. And I feel like a lot of times right now, that mission statement isn't even being considered. So it just needs a more of a balance. We need more people saying, what does your mission statement say, than what does your contract say?
So I used to have a mission statement when I was geared towards weddings, and post-COVID, you caught me off guard because I didn't realize that since post-COVID, we've moved so much into corporate. I have not reassessed my mission statement, not an official one, because the wedding mission statement was a lot more different. It was like an elevated experience and, you know, being memorable. But on the corporate side, I don't have anything like that. But I do know, like, the core concepts of where we stand on everything is, you know, we do want to be human. We want to be the company that you loved working with. We want to be the company that 10 years down the line, your friends and family still hear about how amazing our team was, you know, and that's where I always refer to when it comes to decision making. You know, there's exceptions, you know, where you have to factor in, like, being a hazard, moving your photo booth, or, you know, setting up a backdrop when it's completely it's so unsafe. With, like, when you're setting beachside, it's not safe to have a backdrop set up in the middle of the event. You don't know if you have the weights moving it. You have to assess each individual event or occasion as it comes. I don't think there's like a clear-cut answer of like what you should do. You know, you should make
and also,
you should make the
you have to
decision as a
remember,
business owner.
Yeah, and keep in mind that you're the professional. A lot of times, people don't know, especially if you're working with someone that doesn't have a planner, and like, for example, with private events like weddings, a lot of times, like Lap was talking about, they'll have a photo booth set up somewhere or for a time period that doesn't make sense. Don't just automatically expect that there's a reason behind it, because they're not planners. They've never done this before. They've likely never hired a photo booth before. So try to get ahead of those issues before they come up, and just mention, hey, I saw that your photo booth is planned during your cocktail hour for a different time. Do you want us to schedule a move, or do you want to adjust your time? And, you know, help them make it make sense, because they don't know. Sometimes they just assume that you're going to be present during if they have you for a 4-hour block, and they're boy, I just said it. Cocktail hour is in a different spot. They just assume that the photo booth is going to be part of the cocktail hour. They don't realize that it takes, 90 minutes or 45 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever your breakdown and setup time is. They don't realize that happens, that is part of the equation that needs to take place. So, and it typically is just an email or a phone call, and maybe it's a matter of adjusting the time frame, or maybe you can add on a second booth. It's a good time to upsell a roamer for that cocktail hour, so that you can you don't have to move the booth, and you can make more money having that additional service, and you solve the problem that they didn't realize that they had yet. So it becomes you
Yes.
become more valuable to them.
Yes, don't be afraid to be the expert. I mean, I know a lot of people feel awkward about like if the client says we have our party starting at 6 or we want the photo booth starting at 6. For a corporate event, that's fine, but for a birthday party, nobody shows up at a party at 6. So if your client says we're inviting our guests at 6, we want the photo booth to start at 6, if you don't speak up and become the expert, this is my experience. People do not show up until an hour into the birthday party. So I would recommend you guys start the photo booth an hour later, have that conversation. And the reason why it's so important is because it really will allow you to avoid these questionable, like additional time. Do I run later because they're running later? If you've already had that conversation with your client, this is what I recommend. And if your client's like, nope, I want the photo booth to start at 6. Okay, if you insist on having it start at 6 p.m. and if you guys end up needing more hours because, people don't start using it right away, this is the additional rate per hour. So you have that conversation. You're not on site wondering, do I bring this up like they started late, do I charge the additional time because they started late? You already have that conversation in advance. As a professional, what typically works best for their wedding, what works best for their birthday party. You've been doing this for a long time. You're supposed to be the expert. They've only hired a photo booth once. They have no idea, so be proactive. Don't be afraid to bring up those topics so that you could cover it in advance. So you're not on site wondering, do I refer to my contract? Because you've already talked to your client about it.
Yes. So, moving forward, I guess in closing, make sure you have a contract. Make sure it's unique to your business and your needs, and have an attorney at least look it over, if not draft it. And have a business plan and a mission statement. If you don't want to do a business plan, I disagree with you, and we can have a conversation or a show on business plans and why they are so important as well. But at the very least, write a mission statement. It only needs to be a couple sentences. I did pull up mine, very short. It is to create innovative and unforgettable interactive photography-based experiences to Las Vegas area events. And I need to update mine as well because we are expanding quite a bit out of Las Vegas. But I think the last update I did was probably 5 or 6 years ago. But to create innovative and unforgettable interactive photography-based experiences to Las Vegas area events, very direct, simple. That's all you need. Just 1 to 2 sentences and it'll give you a guide that you can kind of reflect back on when you're trying to make decisions on what you're trying to accomplish or what your overreaching goal is. And I think that's all I've got besides the typical closures. Do you have anything other to add, Lap?
I mean, I think the bottom line is like, don't be afraid to make the decision for your business. I mean, don't look to other people for how you should run your business. I think that's the biggest takeaway. Like, that we all run our businesses different. We all approach the contract different. We all approach how we handle these, gray areas. And you as a boss, you have to make that decision. I mean, if you're just looking to someone else to make that decision, then you're looking to someone else to blame when things don't go well on how you handled it. If you make the decision, it's easier for you to handle any pushback you might have from your client.
Yes. Oh.
Yeah.
Follow us on all the socials, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, our Facebook community. Let us know what your mission statement is, if you've got one, or if you have any advice for other
Need
people.
to update.
Yeah, exactly. And until next time, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Help to keep this free information coming. Subscribe to Pro Booth Talk in iTunes or Stitcher Radio. And while you're there, be sure to give us a 5-star rating. Finally, watch for show updates at facebook.com/ProBoothTalk.